The subcommittee will now come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess of the subcommittee at any time. I'll now recognize myself for a brief opening statement. Good afternoon, everyone. In recognition of the Military Consumer Month, today the Subcommittee on National Security will examine the pernicious and growing threat of financial scams and fraud targeting America's service members, veterans, and their families. According to a recent AARP survey, service members and veterans are 40% more likely to be exploited by financial fraud, including robocalls, suspicious texts, and scam offers than their civilian counterparts. Even more disturbing, 4 out of every 5 service members and veterans surveyed in 2021 reported that they were targeted by scams directly related to their military service or benefits, with 1 in 3 reporting that they lost money as a result. Federal Trade Commission data further reveals that financial scams targeting service members, veterans, and military families have increased dramatically by 69% from 2020 to 2021. Last year, more than 110,000 military consumers filed fraud reports with the agency and reported a collective loss of approximately $267 million. That's a 162% increase over the $102 million lost to fraud in 2020. As chairman of the Task Force on Financial Technology on the Financial Services Committee, I can attest that the emergence of innovative financial technologies, alternative payment systems, and digital currencies has augmented this risk. Younger service members and their families are especially susceptible to exploitation, given their relative lack of financial experience and understandable need for assistance amid frequent relocations, overseas deployments, and their eventual transition back to civilian life. Meanwhile, America's veterans remain vulnerable to financial scams seeking to defraud them of their pension, disability, and other service-connected benefits that they have earned through their dedicated service to our nation. It is especially shameful that the scammers would prey upon their target's sense of duty and patriotism toward their fellow service members and veterans in order to exploit them. The Biden administration, as well as the Federal Trade Commission, the Federal Communications Commission, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau have all undertaken meaningful action to increase financial literacy among our military and veteran communities, as well as to assist military consumers in identifying and protecting themselves against financial scams. These efforts have been reinforced by private sector initiatives led by nonprofit organizations such as AARP and the Cybercrime Support Network in partnership with our veterans service organizations. To better safeguard our service members, veterans, and military families against financial fraud and other predatory activity, Congress has also enacted the Military Lending Act, the Servicemembers Civil Relief Act, and other statutes offering essential protection for military consumers. Last year, Congress passed and President Biden signed the American Rescue Plan, which eliminated what was known as the 90-10 loophole, which incentivized for-profit colleges to aggressively and sometimes deceptively recruit prospective military students. In further support of robust public and private sector collaboration, this week I'm introducing H.R. 8321, the Military Consumer Protection Task Force Act of 2022. And I'm grateful to have the support of Ranking Member Grothman as the lead Republican co-sponsor on this bill. This legislation, which I have also introduced as an amendment to this year's National Defense Authorization Act, would establish a joint task force led by the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Veterans Affairs in coordination with representatives from the Veterans Service Officer community and other non-governmental partners to combat military consumer fraud. The task force would issue regular recommendations to Congress about how we can better warn service members and veterans about the risk of financial scams and frauds, as well as strengthen our enforcement mechanisms and toughen criminal penalties for those who would seek to take advantage of our men and women in uniform. I look forward to hearing from our esteemed panel of witnesses about how we can advance our collective efforts to prevent military consumer fraud and protect the financial security and well-being of America's service members, veterans, and their families. With that, I will now yield to the distinguished ranking member from Wisconsin, my friend, Mr. Grothman, for his opening statement.
Thank you very much for having this hearing. I'll start off by saying there is no hell too hot for those people who would target our veterans with one of these rip-off schemes. I'm pleased to have the opportunity today to highlight the importance of protecting our veterans from schemes that target their sensitive information. The 2021 AARP report about veteran scams paints a damning picture of the sad reality we find ourselves in today, a reality in which bad actors scam our nation's greatest and steal their sensitive financial and user data. In short, the report found that veterans, military, and their families are significantly more likely to be targeted by scam artists than the average American. We must swiftly bring these con artists to justice and prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. A huge problem in my district and a practice that was identified in the report are robocalls. My constituents and many Americans report receiving several of these robocalls a week. The federal government must find solutions to this unwelcome practice that will continue to increase as scammers become more and more creative. Upon leaving active military service, veterans are confronted with a new set of personal challenges. The ever-evolving threat environment extends far beyond traditional robocalls and phishing emails. One of the most famous social media apps in the world, TikTok, is a sophisticated surveillance tool masquerading as a short-form video service. TikTok is owned by Beijing-based ByteDance, which presents an extraordinary set of national security concerns. It was recently reported that individuals in China had access to U.S. user data. This is not only a massive national security risk, but poses a threat to military members, veterans, and their families. The Chinese government, who the FBI director just last week said was the biggest long-term threat to our economic and national security, has the sensitive data of millions and millions of Americans at their fingertips, including veterans and service members. This data goes far beyond what the genre of 30-second videos someone prefers to watch. It includes browsing history, biometric data, location data, metadata, and trove of other sensitive and personal data. This data can be used by the Chinese government to exploit American citizens and gain a security edge. By no means political, the national challenge that TikTok presents is a bipartisan concern. Mr. Chairman, in 2019, you wrote that given the pervasiveness of smartphone technology in the U.S., foreign adversaries may be able to collect sensitive information about U.S. citizens, which presents serious and immediate risks for U.S. national security. I agree, Mr. Chairman, and believe that we cannot have a conversation about veteran scams without talking about the information theft that is occurring on foreign-owned apps like TikTok. I thank all the witnesses for appearing today live and in person, and look forward to a robust discussion about the unique threat environment facing our veterans today. Thank you, Chairman Lynch, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. I'm now happy to introduce our witnesses. First, we're joined by Ms. Malini Mithal, who is the Associate Director of the Federal Trade Commission's Division of Financial Practices, where she supervises the division's investigations of and enforcement actions challenging unfair and deceptive practices for non-bank financial services. Welcome, and thank you. Next, we will hear from Mr. Jim Rice, who is the Assistant Director of the Office of Service Member Affairs at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Prior to joining the CFPB, Mr. Rice had a distinguished three-decade career in the U.S. Army, serving as a medic and in several command positions from the platoon to brigade levels. We will then hear from Mr. Brendan Carr, who is a commissioner on the Federal Communications Commission, where he has focused extensively on efforts to expand the United States 5G infrastructure. Mr. Carr also previously served as the FCC's General Counsel before being confirmed as Commissioner. Fourth, we are joined by Troy Broussard, who is a Senior Advisor for AARP's Veterans and Military Families Initiative, where he establishes strategies and opportunities to support AARP's veterans and military family members, including on financial literacy. Mr. Broussard is also a veteran of the U.S. Army, having served during Operation Desert Storm. Fifth, we will hear from Mr. Robert Berger, who is the interim chief executive officer of the Cybercrime Support Network, which is dedicated to helping individuals and small businesses impacted by cybercrime. Before joining CSN, Mr. Berta had an extensive career with the FBI, including as a unit chief of the National Joint Terrorism Task Force, and he also served in the U.S. Navy as a naval flight officer, earning the rank of lieutenant commander. So, Ms. Mithal, Mr. Rice, and Mr. Carr, it's customary for us to swear in our witnesses, so could you please rise? And Mr. Broussard and Mr. Berta, would you please unmute yourselves in order that we can hear you when we swear you in? Okay. Do you swear, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you very much. You may be seated.
I do.
Thank you. You may put your hands down. Thank you. Let the record show that the witnesses have all answered in the affirmative. I want to thank you, and without objection, your written statements will be made part of the record. With that, with Ms. Mithal, you're now recognized for your 5 minutes of testimony. Thank you.
Chairman Lynch, Ranking Member Grothman, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to talk about the FTC's work on the critical issue of military financial fraud. I'm Malini Mithal, the Associate Director of the Division of Financial Practices at the Federal Trade Commission. As you know, my remarks today are my own and not necessarily those of the Commission or any individual commissioner. Military frauds cause significant harm to consumers. As you noted, last year we received more than 200,000 reports of military fraud, reporting over $267 million in losses. To combat this significant problem, the FTC uses a multifaceted approach. We are a law enforcement agency, and we're not shy about using litigation to strike down harmful practices. For example, in 2021, the top fraud reported by military consumers was imposter fraud. We've all gotten calls from the Social Security Administration or from the IRS that were actually calls from someone else, people that were impersonating the government to get our money or personal information. And recently, we took an action against people who were doing just that, but they were pretending to be from the military. They lured in people who were interested in serving our country, got their personal information using sites like Army.com, and pretended to be an official recruiting channel. But then they turned around and sold that information to for-profit schools, who in turn used that information to make deceptive claims and get people to enroll. The FTC has also brought actions targeting companies that target consumers, including military consumers, when they are making critical large dollar purchases, whether it's a home, their education, or a car. So for example, we've taken action against a large mortgage refinancer that promised bogus rates to the military. We've taken action against for-profit schools that promised veterans jobs that didn't pan out. And recently, the FTC announced an auto rulemaking where we took what we learned at military workshops so that we could address the most pressing problems facing the military community. Now, enforcement and rulemakings are just part of the FTC's work here. We have long emphasized education and outreach to consumers, to military consumers, as a critical priority. Through our Consumer Sentinel network, the FTC collects reports from consumers, including military consumers, about fraud and other illegal practices they encounter, and then we use that information to tailor our education and outreach materials. And we make sure that these materials are easily accessible to military consumers. The cornerstone of the FTC's work to connect with those who serve our country is militaryconsumer.gov, launched in 2013. This resource informs service members, veterans, and their families about fraud and other consumer issues affecting them. The same year we created the site, we reached out to DoD and the CFPB to launch the first Military Consumer Day, which has since expanded to a full month, and as you noted, it's this month, the month of July. This annual event raises awareness about spotting and avoiding financial scams and sharing that knowledge with family and friends. Our agencies have worked closely together on virtual presentations, webinars, and social media events to reach military consumers, their families, and the intermediaries who work with them. The FTC also works closely with the VA to inform veterans and their families about fraud and consumer issues. For example, in 2 days, we'll be participating in a VA conference where we will discuss financial scams and other issues that are important to military consumers. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the FTC's work to combat military fraud. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rice, you're now recognized for 5 minutes for an oral presentation of your testimony. Welcome.
Chairman Lynch, Ranking Member Grothman, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. It is my pleasure to be with you today to discuss the CFPB's ongoing work to protect service members, veterans, and military families from scams and harmful practices as they navigate the financial marketplace. I proudly served in the U.S. Army, first on active duty as an enlisted medic, then with the Wisconsin Army National Guard, then for over 30 years as an officer in the Army Medical Service Corps. I served as the director of the Army Wounded Warrior Program, and finally as chief of the Health Service Division on the Joint Staff. I know firsthand how the financial well-being of service members and their families affects the ability to focus on the mission and their careers. I am proud to lead the Office of Service Member Affairs, or OSA, at the CFPB. Our mission is to address the challenges that adversely affect military families' financial well-being. Today, I'd like to discuss some key areas of our work. First is the evolving nature of the threat that scams and fraud pose to the unique military experience. I want to share some accomplishments, but also where more work needs to be done. Finally, I want to share how our work with the interagency partners is key to our success. It's unfortunate, but a fact, that our men and women in uniform are prime targets for scams and bad actors in the financial marketplace. Our younger service members do not have much experience with money, but get a steady paycheck. This creates an opportunity for lenders and businesses to target our military service members for their hard-earned money. Just look at the statistics. The CFPB has received over 4.2 million complaints, including over 286,000 complaints from service members, veterans, and military family members. They come from every branch of the military and of every rank, from all over the United States, including the District of Columbia and the territories, and from military bases around the globe. Those who served in uniform know that relocation is part of military life, and orders mean a new home and other financial obligations. These are situations where a service member or spouse may need to share personal information, like their Social Security number, credit cards, and bank account information, with a wide range of actors, most legitimate, others less so. We are concerned that service members are subject to increased risk of identity theft, data breaches, and other scams. Recently, OSA published our annual report highlighting the challenges that service members face when dealing with credit reporting companies. In 2021, service members submitted more than 17,000 credit or consumer reporting complaints, making it our #1 complaint category. When issues with credit reporting are not resolved, the consequences for service members and military families can include additional costs to get a car loan and more difficult time to find suitable housing. Negative credit can also result in denial of a security clearance and even separation from service. These are high stakes. We also see problems with medical billing. Despite the assumption that military service means full medical coverage, we find that service members experience a wide range of debt collection and credit reporting on medical expenses. In 2021, we saw over 1,500 complaints related to incorrect medical bills on credit reports. While the national credit reporting companies agreed to remove most medical billing in credit reports by 2023, service members can't afford to wait. I commend the VA for their recent debt reporting rule change, as it will improve the lives of millions of vets and largely eliminate a coercive collection technique. The MLA remains one of the most important financial protections available to service members. Given the heightened risks service members face in the financial markets, the CFPB has taken legal action to ensure compliance by lenders, including consent orders and lawsuits for MLA violations. My military career goes back just far enough to remember a time when we were paid in cash. Now, service members can bank, borrow, and sign a contract for a wide range of financial products on their smartphone. The market is moving fast, and we must ensure service member protections keep pace. As we monitor the marketplace, we have identified some areas where we think further work may be warranted, such as buy now, pay later, abuses of the military allotment system, and other emerging products and services in the digital space. I'd like to close by mentioning some of the collaborative efforts our office has taken with our stakeholders. As part of our mandate under Dodd-Frank, OSA works closely with the DoD, VA, FTC, DOJ, and others. This work is vital and pays dividends. There is no higher calling than the defense of our country, and the Office of Service Member Affairs is committed and proud to be a strong advocate for those who answer that call. I want to thank the Chairman, Ranking Member, and other members of the subcommittee for holding this important hearing and for the opportunity to appear before you. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Mr. Carr, you are now recognized for a 5-minute summation of your testimony.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Chairman Lynch, Ranking Member Grothman, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the invitation to testify. It's an honor to appear before you. Too often, those who dedicated their lives to defending this country are the targets of online scams. At the FCC, we've long worked to crack down on these fraudulent schemes. So I'm pleased to join these witnesses to advance our shared goal in protecting service members. While the threats our active military and veterans face come from a range of online vectors, I want to focus on one particular threat today, TikTok, an application with millions of U.S. users, including service members, that is owned by Beijing-based ByteDance. While many of the frauds we see on other platforms are also perpetrated on TikTok, there is a unique set of national security concerns when it comes to this app. For one, TikTok has engaged in a pattern of misrepresentations regarding both the amount and extent of data it's collected, as well as how much has been accessed from inside China. For another, the flow of this non-public sensitive data into China is particularly troubling, given the PRC's track record of engaging in espionage and other nefarious acts. Indeed, FBI Director Wray stated just last week that the Chinese government poses the biggest long-term threat to our national security, and the CCP is set on using every tool at their disposal to achieve its ends. Many Americans, service members included, have not been viewing TikTok as a national security threat. They treat it as just another app for sharing funny videos or memes. But that's simply the sheep's clothing. At its core, TikTok functions as a sophisticated surveillance tool that harvests extensive amounts of sensitive data from search and browsing history to keystroke patterns, location data, and biometrics, including face prints and voice prints. All of the concerns with TikTok are heightened in the military context. Indeed, Chairman Lynch raised many of these same concerns about TikTok's overseas ties back in 2019 in a letter to Apple and Google. Now, despite its vast data collection, TikTok has grown in popularity among service members. Just one example is the viral TikTok trend where service members upload video of their barracks. In other cases, it's U.S. military equipment and maneuvers. For years, TikTok has been asked point blank whether any of the sensitive data it collects has been accessed from inside China. And for years, TikTok has offered a series of assurances. But according to a recent BuzzFeed News report that obtained leaked audio from TikTok meetings, TikTok's claims about protecting U.S. users' data have been nothing other than gaslighting. Turns out, everything is seen in China, according to a TikTok official quoted in that reporting. Thankfully, multiple military branches have banned TikTok from government-issued devices. Government officials have also urged troops and their dependents to erase the app from their personal phones. And these concerns are bipartisan. Most recently, Senators Warner and Rubio asked the FTC to investigate TikTok for its misrepresentations about data flows into China. TikTok's recent statement that it's moving U.S. data to Oracle servers doesn't eliminate the national security concerns. Indeed, one TikTok employee threw cold water on that safeguard, stating, It remains to be seen if at some point product and engineering can still figure out how to get access, because in the end of the day, it's their tools. They built them in China, according to that BuzzFeed News report. Given TikTok's pattern of misrepresenting data flows, I called on Apple and Google recently to apply their App Store policies and remove them from the App Store. While I'm still waiting for Apple's response, there's no reason that we need to bet our national security on those companies choosing to do the right thing. The government needs to act. So here are some ideas. First, the executive branch agencies should bring their ongoing national security reviews of TikTok to a close and do so with speed. That includes the CFIUS review being run out of the Treasury Department, as well as the Commerce Department's proceeding. Second, TikTok should provide a full accounting of all non-public U.S. data that's been accessed from inside China. Third, I would encourage the FTC to take up Senate Intel's call for a federal investigation and complete that review quickly. Fourth, the government should address the continued use of TikTok on military installations, as well as any use that depicts U.S. military operations. In closing, I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Mr. Broussard, you are now recognized for a 5-minute summation of your testimony. Thank you. Welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here. Chair Lynch, Ranking Member Grotham, and members of the Subcommittee on National Security. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Troy J. Broussard, Senior Advisor with AARP's Veteran and Military Families Initiative, and most proudly a United States Army Desert Storm veteran. AARP has nearly 6 million members who have served or currently serve in the United States military. It's an honor to share the depth of AARP's engagement to help veterans and military families fight back against criminal scammers who target them and where we believe congressional action is needed. You know, AARP has a long history of supporting those who have served in the United States Armed Forces. We launched the Veterans and Military Family Initiative back in 2018 to support this critical community's overall health and well-being as they navigate life's transitions. And our initiative focuses on caregiving, fighting fraud, securing employment, and connecting veterans and their families to earn service benefits. Fraud is on the rise across the country. We are here today to talk about one of those key pillars of our work, fighting fraud. Scammers steal billions of dollars from unexpected consumers every year. The impact on victims and their families is far-reaching and can be financially and emotionally devastating, especially for older Americans. Last year, consumers reported $5.9 billion in fraud losses to the Federal Trade Commission. There are 3 fraud-related trends that are particularly troubling, which cuts across different scams and demographics. These use of gift cards, cryptocurrency, and internet safety. These tactics are the backbone behind the most criminal schemes. Addressing these problems could be the most effective way to stop these criminals. Gift cards. According to our AARP survey conducted earlier this year, 1 in 3 adults say they or someone they know have been asked at some point to purchase a gift card, to pay a bill, or some other debt or obligation to claim a prize. Roughly 1 in 4 adults who were contacted reported they bought the cards, approximately 13 million U.S. adult ages 18 and older. The availability of these gift cards, the relatively high limits on the amounts of money that can be added to cards, and the ability to access these funds instantly make them a weapon of choice for these criminal scammers. Cryptocurrency. That's another scam that's accelerating and have lost about $1 billion in the past year, again, according to the FTC. The vast majority of these losses come from scammers and then victims to pay with crypto. Internet safety. Consumers especially be the vulnerable online. According to a 2021 FTC data, approximately 19% of these scams contact the victim came across online ads or social media. However, 64% of these targets resulted in the victim losing money. Comparatively, only 9% of them reported phone call scams resulted in the loss of money. These scams can range from fraudulent products to fake websites and online imposters. The impact that this has to our service members and veterans and their families. According to the report that we released, which was Scambush, Military Veterans, Battle Surprise Attacks, we found that veterans and active duty service members are 40% more likely to lose money to scams and fraud than other families. And based on our research, we found that fake veteran charities were high, the United States Department of Veteran Affairs home mortgage loan schemes, and bogus free medical equipment. Scammers use military jargon and specific government guidelines to craft an effective pitch to steal the money. Roughly 1 in 3 service members reported losing money to these types of service-related scams: benefit buyouts, fraudulent record scams, and fake charities. So again, what we want to focus on is that we're committed to help fighting fraud against all people of all ages and all backgrounds through our Fraud Watch network, our Fraud Watch helpline, BankSafe, and our Veterans Fraud Center. We look forward to working with you on this critical mission to serve and support veterans and their families. We want to thank you again, Congressman Lynch and committee, for allowing me to bring attention to this critical issue targeting veterans and their families. I really appreciate the opportunity to provide this testimony today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Broussard. Next, Mr. Berta, you're now recognized for a 5-minute summation of your testimony. Welcome.
Thank you. Chairman Lynch, Ranking Member Grotham, members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me here today to speak about the state of cybercrime and the impact it has on our military and veteran community. My name is Robert Berta, and I serve as the interim CEO for the Cybercrime Support Network, or CSN. CSN is a US-based nonprofit with a mission to serve individuals and small businesses impacted by cybercrime. We accomplish that mission in a number of ways, including fightcybercrime.org, an extensive website of resources to help cybercrime victims recognize, report, and recover from over 45 different types of cybercrime. Our peer support program, a 10-week virtual support group for romance scam survivors, and our military and veteran program, a program that enables us to deliver cyber safety training and education to active duty service members, veterans, and their families at no cost to them. This program will be the focus of my testimony today. The military and veteran community is diverse. It's made up of active duty, reservists, guardsmen, veterans, and their families, totaling more than 22 million Americans. Throughout their service, these individuals encounter service-related transitions. Cyber criminals take advantage of these transitions to steal hundreds of millions of dollars from this community each year. Let me share with you some of these transitions and how they can make the military and veteran community more vulnerable to cybercrime. Entering active duty. Often for service members entering active duty, this is their first time on their own, away from home, and with a regular paycheck. Scammers look for people lacking financial literacy and financial literacy resources. New service members often fall into this category. Potential scams include financial purchase scams, credit card scams, and bank account scams. Deployments. Scammers can take advantage of situations where a spouse or a partner is not always available. Single service members face unique challenges trying to deal with the inevitable issues which arise during a deployment. Deployments make service members and their families more vulnerable to almost every type of cyber scam and fraud. Permanent change of station, or PCS moves. PCS moves are a frequent reality for most military personnel and their families. Moving to a new location, often with limited time, also makes the military community more vulnerable to cyber fraud, including real estate scams, rental scams, job scams, and financial purchase scams. And discharge or retirement. Discharge or retirement is a big transition for military personnel and their families. It makes them vulnerable to all the same issues as a PCS move and government impersonation scams as they seek hard-earned veteran benefits and investment scams. CSN launched our military and veteran program in April of 2021 with the belief that education and awareness were critical. In the first phase, the program successfully developed an alliance of over 40 military service organizations, veteran service organizations, corporations, foundations, and federal agencies, including the Department of Veteran Affairs, Disabled American Veterans, Comcast, AT&T, Deloitte, and many others. A highlight of the first phase of this program is a public service announcement aired by Comcast over 33,000 times in 10 military-centric markets, including Fort Myers, Florida, and Colorado Springs, Colorado. Our partnership with the Veterans Administration has provided us the opportunity to air the same PSA in 85 VA medical centers and 30 community-based outpatient clinics with more than 108,000 veteran patients visiting these facilities daily. In the next phase of the program, we plan to leverage this alliance to deliver more cyber safety training and education directly to the military and veteran community at no cost to them. In closing, CSN would like to encourage the federal government to fund nonprofit organizations such as CSN who are working to make the military community more aware of the cyber threat and encourage safe data care practices. Additionally, we encourage your support of the Cyberspace Solarium Commission's proposal for a federal national cybercrime victim and assistance recovery center to serve as a nationwide cybercrime reporting and recovery program to aid not only the military and veteran community, but civilians and small businesses as well. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berta. I will now recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. But before I do, I want to just say thank you to all of our panelists today, both in person and remotely, for your willingness to protect our service members, our veterans, and their families from this exploitation. It's honorable that you spend your time and your skills in such a noble effort, and we really are thankful for your willingness to come before us and to help us figure out ways that we can lend our energies and resources to this same mission. I also want to recognize Mr. Rice, Mr. Broussard, and Mr. Berta for your military service. I think having you as veterans, as men who have served and who have gone through this experience offers a very valuable perspective, I believe, in helping us to understand the nature of this problem. One of the other, so I'm the chair of this committee, but I also chair the task force on FinTech in another committee. And I know that we have had a growing, this problem has grown along with the explosion of financial technology that is being used by our sons and daughters in uniform. And one of the problems that we have is that it's a personal device, so that it's not as if DOD or the Army or Navy or Marine Corps or Air Force or the reserves could possibly come up, or the Coast Guard could come up with a way to intervene before those solicitations come to the individual soldier or person in uniform. And I'm just wondering, you know, you've all got a wealth of information. How much cooperation are we getting? I was just down in Fort Hood. I did a couple of trips down there on an investigation unrelated to this. But as I was pulling into Fort Hood, I see these big billboards, you know, for loans and buy an automobile with no money down, you know, those type of advertisements right outside the base. So you know they're targeting our young people. How much cooperation are we getting? Now, that's on private land. It's not on the base, but it's across the street from the base. I want to make that clear. But how much cooperation are we getting from DOD, the military, the VA? How much cooperation are we getting from them on this mission to protect our veterans and our service members and their families from financial fraud? Mr. Rice.
Thank you, Chairman. It is, as I mentioned in my testimony, it's a close working relationship that we have with the Department of Defense, particularly the Office of Financial Readiness. It is a multiple times a week conversation that we have on a variety of topics. Their mission primarily is to educate their population, so looking at the soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, Coast Guardsman, and Guardian, to make sure that they're aware of the risks that are out there. we take that obligation seriously from that level, the service member level to the installation level, to across the to working with the industries who you mentioned are advertising to those soldiers. At the senior levels at the Bureau, I know that the Director has had several conversations with the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, Mr. Cisneros. They're in agreement about approaches that need to be taken to protect service members, and we'll continue to work on those.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Rice. Anyone else, Mr. Broussard or Mr. Berta or Ms. Mithal, do you have any, or Mr. Carr, any perspective on that?
Sure, I'll just add.
Chairman.
Oh, I apologize.
Ms. Mithal, you're recognized.
Thank you. So we work closely with our partners on this issue, and I will just echo Mr. Rice's statements. We meet regularly with the DoD's Office of Financial Readiness, with the CFPB's Office of Service Member Affairs, with the VA, to name a few. We work on joint branding. We put out messages to military consumers and make sure they're distributed effectively, and we participate in webinars together. We have social media events. So this is an area where we're working very closely and we're prioritizing outreach.
Very good. I'm not sure if that was Mr. Broussard or Mr. Berta that wanted to jump in there, but whoever it was, you're welcome. You're recognized.
I'll jump in really quick here, Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity. As it relates to the VA, I will tell you that throughout our 53 states that we do have, we have connections that we work very closely with the Veterans Administration. And then what we also do is we do teletown halls with them to make sure that we get the word out, to share, some things, that the scams that are going on. And it's a really good relationship working with both. So I just wanted to make sure to add that bit of information to this topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Carr, given the fact that this is, a lot of this is being promulgated on these fintech apps, and platforms, is there any countermeasure that we're applying to sort of police that or to intervene on behalf of our service members?
From the FCC's perspective, we work in partnership with FTC, DOJ, state AGs even. We've had partnerships with Department of Veteran Affairs as well to look at all of these ways that these frauds and schemes, from robocalls to the online platforms that you've mentioned.
Okay. I noticed the trend is, when we gave the numbers, the trends from even over 1 year was increased almost 70%. So I'm just concerned about whether we're keeping pace with the volume of this that's going on. With that, I want to yield to, my time has expired. I want to yield to my colleague, Mr. Grothman, the ranking member, for 5 minutes for his questions.
Thank you much. I'll start off with Commissioner Carr. A little bit concerned about TikTok here. Could you give me, you mentioned in your initial statement, but could you elaborate on the risks involved with the Chinese government having access to personal data?
Yeah, if you look again last week with FBI Director Wray saying that China is our biggest long-term national security threat, using every tool at their disposal. One of those tools is the massive amounts of data that apparently they're having access to that's being pulled off of millions and millions of Americans. And they have a long track record of engaging in business, industrial espionage, blackmail, and other nefarious acts. So we're very concerned about that data flow back into Beijing.
Okay, could you elaborate on what's the danger to our country, though, when they have that data?
Yeah, we've seen this same type of concern, for instance, with Huawei, with ZTE, where they have set up their infrastructure around military installations. We've taken action there. And think about now with TikTok, this is a device right in your pocket that's going inside of the military installations. You're looking at location data, which can give people information about troop movements. There's a range of ways that sensitive data going back to Beijing with their sophisticated AI can ultimately be used to harm U.S. national security.
Okay. I would think then the military would be doing something to say, stay off of TikTok. I guess I'll ask you or anybody else here, are we aggressively educating our service members that stay off of TikTok?
Several military branches have affirmatively banned it from official devices, but that continues to see pervasive use on personal devices. So I think that's a challenge that we need to continue to address.
Service members are using it anyway?
Correct.
Okay. I mean, I would think, like I know, for example, some service members, they aren't even allowed to tell their family members where they are located, right? At times. And to me, this is tantamount of telling the Chinese where they're located, right?
Yeah, we saw this with a similar application, Strava, an exercise app, pulling location data from smart watches, for instance, that was being disclosed. And so there's very serious concerns about this non-public location data, biometrics. And again, it's one thing if TikTok was straightforward and said, you know, we're storing it all in the US, it's never been accessed inside of China, but that's far from the case, according to this reporting.
Could the military be doing more? I'll put it that way, or I'll ask the others. Could the military be doing more to telling our troops or our members to stay off of TikTok?
Yes, I think the government itself can be doing more. I think we have a Commerce Department review that's pending. We have a CFIUS review out of Treasury that's pending. We need to bring those to a close ASAP with the urgency that this national security threat demands.
Okay, now I'll broaden the questions a little bit, and this could be for anybody. Where do these scams originate from, right? They have to originate from somewhere. Are they in this country? Are they other countries? Could someone elaborate both where they believe the scams are coming from, and when we catch people, where are they from? Could you give me some sort of stereotype of who's doing this? Sure, you can answer.
Sir, I'll jump in, sir. I'm not sure that information is widely available. My inclination is that you would find that they're in the United States and outside the United States as well. I think all of the above.
Well, haven't we ever caught anybody?
I'm sure we've caught some people, sir, I'm sure.
And when we catch them, where are they? It's a secret? Can't be a secret.
I don't know, sir, I can't.
Okay, we got 5 experts here today, and nobody knows when we catch somebody where they're located? That's a problem. Nobody knows.
Sure, let me address this from the Bureau. I'm not aware of any enforcement action that the Bureau has taken that involves a foreign actor, that they are all continental United States actors. But that is not tied in any way, my answer is not tied in any way to TikTok. That's enforcement actions against various lenders or organizations that we supervise.
Okay, so can somebody just tell me a little bit? Is there any case that you have in your mind that came up in the last year that you can tell us about? Like how these people decided to do this, or where they came from, what their background is?
Sir, if we can broaden the question to not TikTok also, I can tell
No,
you.
anybody, yeah, that's right. Anybody we were hearing for protecting military service members from
Sure.
financial. Where do these frauds originate? Where are they sitting around planning this?
Sure. So the top fraud area in 2021 reported by military consumers was imposter fraud. So that's, people calling to and pretending they're from the SSA or the IRS to get your personal information. And we've taken action, for example, against that military recruitment scheme. That was actually not a scam. That was located abroad. So we were able to get relief for those consumers. We shut down.
And where were they located?
They were located within the United States, so we were able to go after them and get relief. We have seen imposter scams where the actors are located abroad. In those situations, it is more difficult. At the FTC, we have an Office of International Affairs that has relationships with other countries, and we work to leverage those relationships to see what we can do.
Could you tell us what other countries they were located in?
Oh, for the fraud that I was talking about, they were located here. For the ones that are located abroad, a lot of those matters are ones that either, we've pursued people who live, for example, with crypto cases in France. That's just one example. But they could be located anywhere.
Are they French? Are they immigrants? What's the deal?
So sometimes there are people who are from France. Sometimes there are people who are here and have moved to France.
Okay, well, I guess we've got my time, but I'd still like to learn a little bit more about the type of people who would do this.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson, for 5 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this very important hearing. While everyone can be targeted by scammers, the men and women who serve in our armed forces face a disproportionately higher risk of financially being targeted by scammers. Our nation's veterans have done their duty and deserve to be protected from fraudulent schemes that prey upon them. This is one of the few hearings that has been held on this issue. And if I might do this, and this has resulted in scammers stealing from veterans an estimated $40 million in 2020. So I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for shedding light on this issue to ensure that our veterans are protected. Mrs. Mithal, we know that veterans are over 40% more likely to experience scams and lose money than non-service members. What are some of the factors or circumstances that make military service members and veterans prime targets for financial scams and fraud?
Yes, agreed that unfortunately service members and veterans are attractive targets for fraudsters. Things like a steady paycheck, GI Bill benefits, and pensions make them very attractive targets. And we have taken action at the FTC when people are trying to take advantage of those things.
Thank you. How can the agency investigative practices be improved to ensure that this vulnerable population is adequately protected?
So I think it's a multifaceted approach. We cannot rely on cases alone or even rulemakings alone. Education and outreach is critical. So for example, when we have consumers report fraud to the FTC's website, right away we kind of give out some customized tips that they can use right then and there to try to recover their losses. We have things like relationships with personal financial managers and legal aid groups that interface directly with members of the military so that they are on the ground hearing what's happening and we are providing advice and working with each other there. It really has to be work on all fronts. It can't just be one solution. And of course, another important one is coordination with the people sitting at this table so that we can make sure to leverage our resources.
Thank you. Is there anything that you can tell veterans right now to help make them less susceptible to being scammed?
I would say that it's incredibly important to visit militaryconsumer.gov. That's a one-stop shop that provides tips on detecting and avoiding scams. For example, if someone calls and asks you for money or your personal information, hang up. Don't be rushed. Go online, check out the company or the product, and type in the word scam and see what pops up. And to harken back to something an earlier person said, do not pay by gift cards, cryptocurrency, wire transfer. That's the sign of a scammer. And then finally, if you do find yourself to be a victim of a scam, please report that to the FTC. Again, we use that information to tailor our work, and we provide advice right then and there, customized tips on getting your money back.
Thank you, Ms. Mithal. Mr. Broussard, in April of 2022, the AARP launched the Veterans Fraud Center to protect veterans from malicious actors. Please explain how this program has successfully assisted service members and veterans, as well as how the program intends to improve these services in the future.
Thank you very much, Rep. Johnson. I will tell you, our Vets Fraud Center was an opportunity for us at AARP to put all resources into a one-stop shop for our military veterans and their families. It's a digital online platform that helps veterans and their families protect themselves from coast to coast. The great part about this is that you can have veterans that can go in and their families can go into, there's what we call a scam tracking map. And this scam tracking map, you can put in your zip code and it'll tell you what scams are right near in your area and to be aware of. Because the number one thing to really focus our attention on is to be prepared. Education is key, but it's extremely important that with this fraud center that you could get to, it directly helps you to be wary and to develop that no script when you get a phone call or email or anything along those lines, you are ready and armed to fight back and say, no, I'm not going to provide you my military records or social security number or any of those opportunities there. So that Vet Fraud Center online, and it really works very fantastic for our members and military veterans as well.
So can you give the web address and a phone number?
Absolutely. What we can do is you can go to www.vetsfraud.org/vetsfraudcenter, and it's a free site that you click on, and then it'll bring everything up for you. It'll bring our AARP Fraud Watch, our helpline number as well, and it'll bring it's a one-stop shop to where you can access these free resources.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the distinguished gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Gibbs, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Carr, I want to follow up a little bit more on TikTok. Do we know who owns TikTok?
The parent company is an entity called ByteDance with their headquarters in Beijing.
Okay, so it's a Chinese company.
And then the Chinese government actually has a small ownership stake in ByteDance as well. And there's been reports of over 100 CCP members located in just the Beijing office of ByteDance alone.
So it's pretty obvious and clear that the Chinese Communist government has access to TikTok.
The reporting is that there's virtually no distinction between ByteDance and TikTok, and that there's employees at ByteDance that work 10 to 7 for ByteDance, and then they work a double shift to work on TikTok matters, according to BuzzFeed reporting.
So how's come the administration or FCC or one of our entities can't declare a national security threat and just completely ban TikTok access, or, am I missing something here?
We can, I think we should. Commerce Department has a proceeding underway that I think they need to bring to a close quickly that's looking at TikTok. Treasury, CFIUS, the Foreign Investment Group, according to TikTok itself, is negotiating an agreement with TikTok right now. I think that needs to be brought to a close immediately.
Because the technology just really impresses me, all the changes in my lifetime, in the last 20 years or less. And I just upgraded my iPhone, and I was amazed. I always put it off to upgrade my iPad, my laptops and all that, because it was always such a pain transferring it all. I upgraded this iPhone, and the technology you can download over from the iCloud, or the way I did it, I set my old iPhone next to it, and within 5 minutes, everything on my old phone came onto this phone. The apps, the passwords, everything. I mean, it was incredible. And it was really kind of a nice experience because it wasn't a pain. But it does make you wonder, if they have access to the servers on the TikTok, for example, and I'm not familiar with TikTok, and I see the way the technology works, that, I don't know how you have firewalls or what, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's a challenge. Look, there's a baseline level of data that all applications are pulling that's concerning. In fact, there's work right now in Congress. Catherine Morse Rogers, Republican leader on ENC, is working on a privacy bill that would address that. But with TikTok, it's especially concerning given, one, their pattern of misrepresenting where the data is going. They've been asked point blank, has this been accessed from inside China? And they say, well, we've never given it or shared it, as their words, with the Chinese government. That's not a question.
You can't believe anything that the Chinese government, Communist government tells you. If you are, I got some land to sell you somewhere. But yeah, I mean, it should be a national security threat, and we should address it that way and move forward. Commissioner Carr, on robocalls. I mean, have you ever met anybody that doesn't get robocalls and is not upset about it?
It's unbelievable. It is an absolute scourge. It's rendered the traditional telephone network almost unusable. People don't pick it up. I get them all the time. When I walk down the street in my neighborhood, my neighbors yell at me, why aren't you doing more? We are doing a lot, but there's no question that we need to do more. We're increasing fines. We're working more with state AGs.
Can you give any examples without naming, specifically naming, have we taken down entities that are doing robocalls and if they've been prosecuted? I mean, what's the status on that?
We have. We issue, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of fines. These are boiler rooms. They pop up all over the place. It's like whack-a-moles. One thing that our FCC chair has advocated for is giving the FCC authority to go to court to enforce and collect on our fines. Because right now we issue fines and that moves over to DOJ to decide whether to go to court.
Now, I assume a lot of these robocalls are from foreign source, not domestically, so that's another challenge. How do we address that?
They are. We have an authentication process in place called Stir Shaken that we're applying in the U.S. network to combat robocalls. But the networks abroad don't necessarily have that same sophistication. So we're getting calls in from abroad that carriers can't really identify where they're coming from. And that makes it harder to trace back and therefore block the fraudulent ones. But a lot of this is coming from overseas.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear. And just see here in my notes that U.S. consumers received nearly 4 billion robocalls per month in 2020. I mean, that's just, I'm sure it's correct because I get several, I don't know, maybe half a dozen or more a day. And it's interesting. Sometimes they come up potential spam, I should say. And then some you don't know who they are. And so I just let them go to voicemail. Of course, they never go to voicemail. They never leave a voicemail. So I don't know what the solution is, but I know it's, we had the registry where you sign up to help prevent getting those. I don't know how effective that's been because I still get them and you still get them. So any last comments on that?
No, we're working on it. We're standing up this call authentication framework, but there's still plainly a lot more that we need to do to break the back of these robocalls.
Okay, thank you. Yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the ranking member for any closing remarks or questions he might have.
Sure, I'm going to follow up a little bit what we talked on last time. First of all, if you catch somebody, what happens to them? What do we do? Can you give me an example of when somebody's been prosecuted, what type of sentence they got?
In the FCC's case, for instance, we will issue hundreds of millions of dollars in fines. Collecting those fines then moves over to DOJ to go to court. And that's why that idea has been raised about giving the FCC authority, potentially with state AGs, to go directly to court so we don't have to wait on another agency with their own docket of priorities to bring those to a close.
That'd be a good thing to have. Does anybody go to a prison, or is it just a civil thing, or what do we do?
In the FCC context, it's just fines, monetary fines.
Well, that's not very good, is it?
I think there's more that can be done, and that's why potentially pairing with state AGs and looking at other actions could be even more effective.
Should be some sort of long prison sentence if you're ripping up people for hundreds of thousands of dollars, shouldn't it?
I have no problem with throwing the full book at people that are engaged in these fraudulent schemes.
Yeah, we got to up things a little bit. And I'm going to follow up on what we said last time. I'd like to know in general on these schemes, where are they originating? Are they from American citizens? Are they from citizens abroad? Are they from people who've engaged in other criminal behavior? I mean, do you have, say, Commissioner Carr, do you have any examples that come to mind, or the last 5 or 6 cases on your desk? Tell us a little bit about where these came from.
Yeah, I can look and provide you more details. Again, with robocalls, a lot of this is overseas from India, from other countries, and I can provide you more detailed briefing on specific.
Sure, which countries?
India is one, Pakistan is another one, but I can provide you even more details on that.
Well, yeah, good. Let's find out about that. You guys have anything else to say about where these things are originating?
Representative, the examples that I have, and I'll check with our enforcement folks and give you a more complete answer, but the examples I have are all U.S. companies, U.S.-based companies, and actions that took place in the U.S. Against service members.
Well, U.S. companies is a little bit misleading. You mean like honest companies, or are these rip-offs and not even real companies?
The examples that I have are real companies.
So real companies go into business just to scam people? I would think if I'm going to break the law, I wouldn't do it with a real company, but you can tell me. Is that what goes on?
I'm not sure that I can characterize it as a company that went into business to do that particular thing, but as a part of its business, and I'll cite one example, an operator was found in violation of the Military Lending Act and the Electronic Fund Transfer Act. So this company was originating loans typically in the range of $500 to $10,000. Those violations, and they were a repeat offender, those violations received a civil money penalty of $2.175 million. And
what were their legitimate business? If you're implying it's a business, did they have another end of it that one could describe as legitimate?
They were in the business of doing loans, sir.
Okay, so in other words, were they breaking that special bill for veterans? Is that what you're talking about?
They were violating the Military Lending Act, most likely by going above the 36% threshold.
Okay, that's interesting that somebody would do that. So it's legal to do that if you're not dealing with veterans, and then they just got greedy and went for the veterans too? Is that the deal?
I owe you more detail on that. I can't speak to the particulars.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments on who's doing this sort of thing?
Sure, I'm happy to talk a little bit about the FTC's work here. So we've seen frauds that happen from anywhere. They can be from the United States. Sometimes actors are located abroad. I will tell you the kinds of threats we've seen or the kind of issues we've seen include things like debt collection from callers within the U.S., where they call and they tailor their threats to military consumers. They might call, for example, and say, if you don't pay up, I'm going to tell your commanding officer. I'm going to ruin your military career. We've shut down operations like that, and we've gotten money back for consumers. We're also a civil agency, a civil law enforcement agency, so we don't put people in jail. We do work closely with criminal partners, and we refer cases to them to get their help as well.
It seems to me, and you can ask me whether this would be helpful, would it be good if you had the ability to put people in prison? If there were criminal penalties that would go with some of this stuff?
So we're a civil law enforcement agency,
Right.
and those are the bounds within which we act. As for additional tools along those lines with Congress, you know, I think the commissioners would speak better to that. I don't know that the commission's taken a position on that.
Well, I'll give you one more question, then my 5 minutes is up. It would seem to me that if I was engaging in illegal behavior and my only penalty is a civil penalty, I would think a lot of people who engage in criminal behavior are kind of live day by day or spend all their money they get or whatever, in which a civil penalty is kind of meaningless. And if it is kind of meaningless, don't you think some sort of criminal penalty is in order?
I think that prison time, jail time, all these things are incredibly important, and that's why we work with our criminal partners. I agree that, you know, there are a lot of people that are going to continue doing fraud because it's profitable, and jail time is very important.
Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. Ms. Smithall, you just touched on a very good point. We hadn't discussed that yet. I know that DOD regards financial readiness and financial competence to be equally as relevant as operational readiness for a lot of these soldiers. And I know that a lot of our men and women in uniform who get into financial difficulty, you know, they have one of these imposter incidents. Oftentimes, you know, bad information goes on their credit report, and they end up losing their security clearance. And I know that the last numbers we have in this regard are from 2014. Those are the last numbers that are available. At least we couldn't find any more recent. But in 2014, the DOD estimated that 80% of the security clearance revocations and more than 4,700 separations from the military were connected to financial difficulties. I mean, that's 80% of security clearance revocations. That really does, as you indicated, you know, that threat of ruining their military career is very real. Do we have, and I offer this to all of the witnesses, do we have any countermeasures? Does the CFPB have anything to look at that, you know, those consequences that, you know, this person's being separated from the service because of financial difficulties? Do we have any more recent, you know, data on that?
Chairman, I don't have any more recent data on the folks who either lost a clearance or were forced out of the service because of a financial difficulty.
Yeah.
But I will say that the tools that are in place, the Military Lending Act, the Servicemembers Civil Relief Act, that it's incumbent on us, and I'm talking about all of our partners, that to ensure that those are strengthened and that those are followed. In my earlier answer about how we work with DOD, I didn't mean to imply that it is all the service members' responsibility. We have a huge responsibility to ensure that they're educated, but by the same token, at the other end of the extreme, we've got to hold those bad actors accountable. So it is the strength of the MLA and SCRA that has to get that backbone to it.
Yeah, you know, it's bad enough that these kids, mostly kids, being exploited, but then to have them punished for falling victim to this exploitation is beyond the pale. So I don't know if any of our remote witnesses had anything to add on that. Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for your willingness to testify and help the committee with its work. I also want to thank you for your ongoing effort to protect our sons and daughters in uniform, our veterans, and the military families. In closing, I want to thank our panelists for their remarks, and I want to commend my colleagues for their participation and their very keen questions in this important conversation. With that, without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit additional written questions for the witnesses through the chair, which will be forwarded to the witnesses for their responses. And I ask our witnesses, if any questions are forwarded to you, please respond as promptly as you are able. This hearing is now adjourned. Thank you.